How are you today? Today we're going to make scones. You might have heard them as scones or scones. It doesn't matter how you say it, we're going to make some.
You will need a knife, a fork and a teaspoon, some measuring cups, pastry brush, spatula, large mixing bowl, a jug, a cutter, timer, apron, cooling rack and baking sheet, and a rolling pin. For our ingredients, we need some flour, some butter, some sugar, baking powder, milk, raisins, and an egg.
Let's get started. Make sure that you've washed your hands because we're going to use our hands in this recipe. And then we're going to put on our apron to make sure that we don't get our clothes dirty. And then we're going to start measuring our ingredients into our bowl. First of all, we're going to take our flour and we're going to measure 3 cups of flour. So remember when we did this before, we measured out so that it was really flat on the top. We want to measure 3 of those, so that's 1, 2, and 3. Put them in our bowl. Next, we're going to take our baking powder. So our baking powder helps our scones to rise. So we're going to add 1 teaspoon for every cup of flour. We had 3 cups of flour, so we're going to measure 3 teaspoons of baking powder. Make sure that you flatten it out so that it's nice and flat. When we've done that, we're going to get our sugar. Now we're going to measure 1/2 cup of sugar. And we're going to tip it into our bowl. Then we're going to take our butter or our margarine and we're going to chop it up. So we're going to take our butter, and we want this to be quite firm so that it doesn't go all mushy when we're mixing it up. So we're just going to cut it into little pieces before we add it to the bowl. And then I'm going to put it into my bowl, and I'm going to break it into little bits before I put it in there, like this. Now we're going to do something that they call rubbing in. So we're going to rub the butter between our fingers and mix it with the flour. Now you can do this in a machine if you like, but it's kind of fun to do it with your fingers. You have to make sure all the lumps are gone before it will be ready. This might take a little time.
Now I've been rubbing mine for a little while, but you can see it still has lumps of butter in it. So I have to keep going until it looks a bit finer than that. So I'll see you in a little while. How are you doing with your rubbing? Do you see mine's all nice and lump free now? It has no big lumps in it, so it's all nice and fine.
When you've finished rubbing in, it should look nice and fine like this. We're going to add some raisins to our mix. So we're going to measure them out. You might need to wash your hands to do this. So we're going to measure out our raisins into our cup like that, and we're going to tip them into our mixture. We're going to put them to one side. Now we're going to take our measuring jug and we're going to crack our egg into the jug, and we're going to throw away the shell. Then we're going to measure our milk, and we need 3/4 of a cup. So I've got a 1/4 cup I'm going to measure, and then I've got a 1/2 cup I'm going to measure. So I'm going to measure that into my jug, and then I'm going to use my fork to whisk up the egg and the milk mixture. I'm going to gently pour our milk into the middle of our mixture. Now don't add it all, because we're just going to add about half, and then we're going to mix it up a little bit. And then we're just going to keep adding it a little bit at a time until we get our mixture to the right consistency. So I'm going to add some more, and I'm going to mix it all up. And it feels a bit gooey in the hands, but we're going to make some lovely yummy scones. So if it sticks to your fingers, you just pull it off like this. Now we don't want it too wet, because if we have it too wet, we won't be able to roll it out. I need a little bit more. It gets a bit yucky at this point. We're going to make it into a dough like this. Now when we've done that, we're going to keep this little bit of milk for later on. When we've done that, we're going to take it all off our hands like this. Just rub it together, rub your hands together, take all the mixture off your hands, and then you can wash your hands. Now we're going to add a little bit more flour to our worktop so that we can roll it out. So I'm going to put a little bit in the corner here too to help me with the rolling. I'm going to spread it all over my worktop, and then I'm going to get my big ball of scone mix out of my bowl. Then I'm going to take my rolling pin. I'm going to take some flour in my fingers, and I'm going to rub my rolling pin with some flour. That's just to stop my dough getting stuck on my rolling pin. And we're going to roll it out very gently. We don't want to be too rough. We want very gently. Now, if you've got a cutter like this, you might want to make it as deep as the cutter. So we're going to make it this deep, so it's just about ready to roll out. So I'm going to put my bowl to one side, and I'm going to take my baking sheet, and I'm going to start cutting out my scones. So I'm going to push down through with my cutter, and I'm going to push it through, put them on my baking sheet like that.
I'm going to keep cutting out my scones and putting them on my baking sheet. And sometimes you get a little raisin gets caught on the side, but that's okay. I'm going to keep doing that until I've used all of the dough that I have rolled out. Now we've finished rolling out all of our dough, we're going to take that little bit of milk that was left and we're going to pour it into our little pot. And we're going to take our brush and we're going to brush each one of our scones with milk. It doesn't matter if the little bit goes over the side, that's okay. And when we've done that, we're going to put it into the oven. So we're going to put our scones into the oven. We're going to set the timer for 15 minutes. When the timer goes off, we're going to check that our scones are brown. If they're not quite brown enough yet, we're going to put them back in for another 2 minutes. So we're going to look at them now. I'm just going to turn off the timer and then I'm going to have a look and see how they're doing. So they're not quite brown on the top. Some of them are, but they're not quite there. So I'm going to put them back in and I'm going to put the timer on for another 2 minutes. There goes my timer again. I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to check my scones again. This time they look nice and brown, so I'm going to take them out and I'm going to put them onto my worktop. And then I'm going to leave them to cool for a minute and then I'm going to put them onto my cooling rack. So I let them cool on the baking tray just for a minute and then we'll move them to the cooling rack. You might need to get an adult to help you with this. So now we've left our scones to cool for a minute. We're going to put them onto our cooling rack so that they can cool down before we eat them as a delicious snack. Once your scones are finished, you can have them just as they are, or you can have them with butter and jam. So I'm going to take one of my scones and I'm going to cut it in half with my knife. And then I'm going to add some butter. Add some butter to the top of my scone. Just a little bit like that. And then I'm going to take a spoon. I'm going to open my jam and a spoon of jam onto the top of my scone. Like that, and spread it out. You can enjoy your scones whichever way you like. Hope you've enjoyed making them with me today. I'll see you again soon.